it's to inform parents and really the community in general. You know, where are we? What do we need to worry about? And just a general awareness about what we're looking at here locally.
But we've got units that are all setting up over on the east side.
Generally, Gilbert's a pretty safe place, but unfortunately, drug abuse kind of hits all kinds of different people in all different types of areas. Overall, in terms of drug trafficking, large quantities of drugs being stored and shipped and moved through the Gilbert area is pretty rare in terms of the rest of the valley, but unfortunately, we do still have a lot of drug usage here. It's really important that parents look at what their kids are up to, know who they're hanging out with, what they're doing, where they're going. Just kind of, you know, look at your own life and see how that fits. I am the Tactical Operations Lieutenant over at Gilbert PD. I supervise our Special Investigations team, which is comprised of 1 sergeant and 4 detectives, and their primary mission is to do narcotics enforcement. Speaking about kind of what they've run into, when we talk about trends here in Gilbert and really in Arizona in general, especially in the valley, one way to look at it is to look at what we're running into. What kind of seizures are we doing out on the street? And then another way to look at it is what are the kids and the folks that live in our community, what are they actually using? This first slide talks about the overall seizures that our Special Investigations team has done this year so far, year to date. And as you can see, with regard to regular marijuana, 669 pounds, high-grade marijuana, which we'll kind of talk about a little bit later, it's a little bit different, 66 pounds, meth 34.5, cocaine 25.9, and heroin 23 pounds. The street value on those drugs combined is about $1.5 million, and that's if you got the Costco bulk price on those drugs, so to speak. By the time they get retailed out and they actually end up with the end user, it's usually 3 or 4 times that amount. When we look at drug seizures here in the valley, we also have to keep in mind that the Phoenix metro area is a major hub to the rest of the United States. Yes, sir.
You may be covering this because I don't know what your slides are, but are you going to tell us trend-wise, how does this compare with last year or previous years?
I can tell you that really, if we were to compare it to last year, the drug trends don't change that much from year to year, but if we were to go back 5 or 10 years, and I'm going to get to some of these changes, a lot of things have changed, particularly with meth and prescription drug use and things like that. But what stays kind of consistent is the demand for all kinds of drugs. As you can see, all of these categories, if you multiply them out by their street value, all of them end up being around $300,000 takes. So 669 pounds of marijuana you can buy for about $330,000. The heroin's about $230,000 worth of heroin. There's just significant quantities of all these different categories. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have drugs that are coming up from the border. They stop temporarily in the Phoenix metro area. They're sold or brokered to middlemen, and then they're shipped out to the rest of the country. And most of the states that reside in the Southwest are dealing with that same problem. It's not necessarily indicative of what people necessarily use here in Gilbert, per se. And just furthering that conversation, when we look at this guy up here in this picture, this is from the Arizona Meth Project, if you go onto their website right now. This guy's picking at sores, he's got bad teeth, and these are a lot of the symptoms that we see for people that use methamphetamine. The Arizona Meth Project has done such a good job at demonizing methamphetamine that we've seen this trend now is meth use is down. In fact, meth production here in the United States and in Arizona is virtually non-existent. We just don't run into meth labs very much anymore. Most of the meth that we do encounter, because we still encounter it, as you saw on the previous slide, all of it is coming up through Mexico. But there's 2 things that have led to the decline of meth use here in Arizona. One is the Arizona Meth Project did a great job at showing young people, these are the effects, these are what you see, and they kind of capitalized on the fact that teenage people are kind of vain. They don't want to look like the gentleman up here. So they want to avoid that. And then the ephedrine regulation, where you have to go, if you buy Sudafed at Walmart, you now have to fill out paperwork to get those drugs. By locking up the ephedrine, it kept the local cooks from being able to convert the chemicals and make their own labs locally. So what has replaced meth here locally in terms of use? That's heroin. We do run into lots of older teens and young adults that are heroin users. A lot of them, when we speak to them after we arrest them on the enforcement side, we'll ask them, do you use methamphetamine? And they'll get sort of offended by that question. Well, I don't have sores in my teeth. I don't want my teeth all messed up. I stick with heroin. But one of the problems with heroin is that you don't see a lot of the physical effects right away. People can use it for a while and they sort of look normal, and you don't deal with that same deterrent with the vanity issues. But we also have to deal, obviously, with overdoses and deaths due to heroin and the extreme addiction that comes with it. The two common roads that we find with regard to people that end up using heroin are either they started with prescription pills recreationally, or they had an injury, or however they came in contact to prescription pills. And the prescription pills worked well, drug-wise, they're very effective. People get hooked on them. The problem is they're also very expensive. They can be as costly as $30 a pill out on the street. So young people will resort to buying heroin instead. It's a lot cheaper. Once we get to a point with the user where they're hooked on heroin, when we speak with them on the enforcement side, they'll tell us that we literally have to have it, otherwise we get sick. And by being sick, we mean if you ever think about having the flu, times that by 10, and that's what it feels like if we don't use. So we end up with people who feel like they have to use heroin every day just to literally get out of bed. Moving on to marijuana, there's kind of two kinds of marijuana out there. There's regular marijuana, which is a picture there on the bottom left, and then there's high-grade or chronic, as it's known on the street, marijuana that's on the right. As you can see, they look different, and they are very different. The high-grade marijuana has a much stronger THC content, much stronger effects, and it's becoming increasingly more popular. We deal with a lot of home invasion robberies, a lot of parking lot robberies with people still buying and selling marijuana. It's still illegal to trade marijuana for anything, to exchange it for anything of value. You still cannot go out and sell marijuana or buy marijuana, even with a medical card. We have had deals where people have been robbed during police operations for very small amounts of marijuana. And to say that there is no crime or any violence that goes along with marijuana, it would be a misstatement. There certainly is. In terms of medical marijuana grows, as most of you know right now, we are in a situation where the dispensaries for medical marijuana are not fully up and running. That issue is still being dealt with by different government agencies and different courts. So we have people that have been given a card and that have right now the statutory right to grow their own marijuana at home. There are certain limits on how many plants they can have, but it is an issue that law enforcement is dealing with, particularly from neighbors that say, this person's growing marijuana at their home and I don't like that. And right now that's that is the way the law is set up. But like I said, it's still illegal to exchange anything of value for marijuana. The last category of drugs that I wanted to talk about, along with the proliferation of prescription pills, the Oxycodones, the opiates that people get hooked on, we're seeing increasingly more and more the spice and bath salt cases. And a lot of people have questions about what exactly are bath salts and spice. It's not the aromatherapy or the traditional bath salts that people used to put in water and kind of enjoy. It's completely different stuff. It's a central nervous stimulant. It's made of synthetic chemicals, comes in a powder and crystal form. People buy it for $25 to $75 per 50 milligram packet. It's relatively cheap compared to other drugs. It's available through the internet, and when people get it, they typically snort it, although you can, as long as it gets into your body, it's going to have some type of effect. The behaviors that we typically see with people that use bath salts or spice is they have euphoria for about 3 or 4 hours. psychosis. There are times where they become suicidal. They become high, similar to cocaine, meth, or LSD. Extreme paranoia, psychotic features. They report seeing things that aren't there. Violent behavior, confusion. We deal with people on a routine basis that are taking bath salts and driving. So you can imagine all of those types of behaviors, plus trying to drive an automobile. So it's become a real problem. In terms of whether or not it's legal or illegal, as you can see, that MDPV, that's one of the substances that's banned under state law. And that's one of the substances that was in one of the original versions of bath salts. And the Arizona State Legislature recognized this is bad stuff, we need to ban it. They added this chemical to the law, and you cannot sell bath salts with this particular chemical. The problem is, because it's a synthetic chemical and it's made in a lab, the chemist will change the formula a little bit, change it into another compound, put that in the bath salts, and it's always this cat and mouse game with the legislature. The chemists make it into a different compound before the law can catch up to it. So what's recently happened is the DEA has taken the lead on bath salts and spice, and they have basically seized a lot of the assets for the folks that produce this at the highest levels in the United States. And there was a lot of movement in the last couple of months by the DEA. So they understand the plight or the situation by the state governments trying to ban these chemicals and keep up with it. And they're taking the lead on the federal side and trying to discourage manufacturers from producing it to begin with. But somebody can walk in to a smoke shop or order over the internet and buy these right now. So as long as they don't have a chemical that's currently banned. And from a treatment side, this is Lacey.
Okay, is it this one? Okay. Yes, from the intervention and the prevention side, at the police department, we deal with both youth and adults who are involved in substance abuse, and we're seeing exactly what Mike was just talking about as far as what people are coming in for. In our youth diversion program, they may come in for even just alcohol, and what we do is we do an assessment to assess all of their use, because what we're seeing is we may get them on alcohol, but they're also involved using bath salts. We see a huge problem with prescription medication that they're getting from parents and friends' parents' medicine cabinets. So we'll assess them, and then depending on how much they're using and what they're using, we have education and we can refer them out for intervention for that. And then usually we'll do follow-up with them and their parents. Then we also see a lot of adults from the municipal court, and that is for DUI drugs, drug paraphernalia, and then minor consumption of alcohol. So they, again, are court-ordered to be assessed by us, determine their level of usage, they're court-ordered out into treatment, and then they're monitored until they complete treatment. And seeing very similar things as far as youth and adults. Then on the prevention side, I passed around a brochure that we have at the police department that is always in the Youth and Adult Resources lobby. We have one that's on drugs and we have one that's on gangs. And we just really push education. Parents have to stay current. And it's really hard even for us to stay current because things change so quickly and new things come out. And so parents really have to make an effort to stay educated and kind of keep up with what's going on. The other thing is they have to stay involved. They've got to know where their kids are, know who they're with, know what they're doing, where they're doing it, and just a constant reminder to them that it's okay for them to be doing that as parents. And then finally being a good role model as far as how are they role modeling their behavior as far as substances. Because when we look at all of this, still the number one problem is alcohol. And it's always been that way, and I think it will always stay that way. And that's kind of the starting point for all of this. As far as DUIs, we are seeing more DUI drugs than we used to in the past, but there's still, a large portion of them are alcohol related. And then I brought together, these are a bunch of resources that parents can use. They're great resources, and they're usually really good about keeping up as far as what's going on and what the current trends are especially among adolescents.
We really worry a lot about the teens, particularly if they're dabbling in illegal prescription drug type use. It's extremely addictive. A lot of times it leads to heroin use, and unfortunately by the time we contact these teens and young adults, it's too late. They've been taking these drugs for a long time, and it's almost impossible to get off. Know what your kids are up to, who they're hanging out with, and particularly if they're prescribed some kind of prescription narcotic opiate pill, really monitor how much they're using, because that can spin out of control pretty quick, and then we end up having to deal with the repercussions later.